News when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Dan Schwartzman. We check the markets for you all day long here at Bloomberg. The S&P 500 ending the day flat, the Nasdaq gaining 0.3%, while the Dow fell by 0.25%. The 10-year Treasury yield was at 4.31%, the 2-year yield at 3.78%. President Trump says the U.S. will be holding meetings with Iran next week. Trump, though, says he doesn't think there needs to be a diplomatic agreement on Iran's nuclear program after the U.S., quote, obliterated 3 of the country's nuclear facilities in Saturday's bombing. The Israelis, in a post on X from the Prime Minister's office, say that Israel assesses that the U.S. bombing strike combined with Israel's strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities has set the country's program to develop nuclear weapons back by, quote, many years. Iran has signaled through its mission to the United Nations that it is willing to resume talks with the U.S. President Trump securing a historic agreement at the NATO summit in the Netherlands as NATO leaders pledged to increase defense spending to 5% of GDP while renewing their ironclad commitment to mutual security. Trump has repeatedly criticized European allies for not spending enough on their own security while relying on American protection. Trump, though, said after the meeting that the U.S. was, quote, here to help them protect their countries. Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Hordern reporting on how the money will be spent percentage-wise.
Right now, when it comes to core defense that each member state should be spending, it's at 2%. So they are increasing this for core military spending. Think of ammunition, tanks, all the artillery. That will go to 3.5%. The remainder 1.5% is part of the industries that potentially could support the industrial complex. Maybe some funds can go to things like cybersecurity or border patrol.
That's Bloomberg's Anne-Marie Hordern at the NATO Leaders Summit in Europe. Meanwhile, President Trump threatening to make Spain pay twice as much in a trade deal as a NATO ally said it won't reach the goal of spending 5% of GDP on its military. It would only increase to 2.1%. Trump not happy with Spain.
Spain is the only country out of all of the countries that refuses to pay. And, so they want a little bit of a free ride. But they'll have to pay it back to us on trade because I'm not going to let that happen.
Spain is currently the lowest spender in the alliance as a share of its economic output. The Federal Reserve voted 5-2 today to roll back the enhanced supplementary leverage ratio, which applies to the largest U.S. banks. The plan reduced their capital requirement from 5% to 3.5% to 4.5% and from 6% to 3.5% to 4.5% for their banking subsidiaries. Big banks were saying that the current rule limited their ability to hold more treasuries and act as intermediaries in the $29 trillion market. Meanwhile, Fed Chair Jerome Powell testifying before the Senate Banking Committee, repeating his message that officials don't need to rush to lower interest rates, while also citing the strong economy and uncertainty over how tariffs will affect inflation. Powell also saying the central bank was still struggling to determine the impact of tariffs on consumer prices. President Trump says he has 3 or 4 people in mind to succeed Powell when his term expires next year. Trump has repeatedly criticized Powell, even referring to him as a, quote, very stupid person. Trump has lobbied hard for Powell to lower interest rates. The new chairman of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, Martin Kulldorff, says the center's vaccine panel is adding a new subcommittee to review the current childhood immunization schedule and examine shots that haven't been studied in at least 7 years. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has revamped the agency's advisory committee on immunization practices since taking over. According to the CDC, infants currently get the vaccines within 24 hours of birth. Shell has denied a Wall Street Journal report that it is in active talks about acquiring its London-based oil rival BP. BP has been under intense pressure after years of poor performance and the intervention of activist shareholder Elliott Investment Management. Bloomberg Intelligence senior global energy analyst Will Hares is skeptical of a possible Shell takeover of BP.
There's huge hurdles here for a full takeover for Shell taking over BP. There's antitrust issues. There'd be years-long synergy realization challenges, cultural integration. So I really think that a full takeover is highly unlikely. It's a big ticket item, even for a company as big as Shell.
That's Bloomberg Intelligence senior global energy analyst Will Hares. Download the Bloomberg Business Week daily podcast to hear the entire conversation. BP surged as much as 10% in New York earlier on Wednesday on the report it was in early-stage takeover talks with Shell. That's news when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Dan Schwartzman, and this is Bloomberg.